Welcome to our next session that we have for Médias on Seine. My name is Tini Sevak. I'm the Vice President of Audiences and Data for CNN International Commercial. I'm joined with you all here today and honored really to be here at Médias on Seine to talk to you about a topic that's really sort of relevant to the times that we're in. So the next session that we're going to go through, and if I may, is to go through sort of in the turbulent times that we're in, how can we better engage with audiences, build trust, and create that emotional connection that we have with them? If we look at the year that we've had, this has been a year of time of reflection and reevaluation. According to a recent Accenture study that was done, 50% of those said that during the pandemic, they really took the time to reevaluate what was important to them, the relationships that they had, what was valuable to them in their lives. And if we think about this in an uber competitive online space, as brands and publishers, it's important to know how can we really understand the values of our audiences, the values of our consumers, and really what we need to sort of do to nurture those existing relationships that we had pre-pandemic, but also how can we foster new ones as we come out of this? So as we look at audiences and the time that they sort of had over the last 20 months, their behaviors have changed, their motivations have changed, and moreover, their expectations that they have from brands have changed. So the important part as either publishers or a brand or an advertiser is, how do you keep pace with that consumer expectation? How do you keep pace with the ways that they're living, they're working, and they're playing? So whether this is, and we think about sort of the role that trust has in this, this time, it's how we travel, it's how we engage with audience, it's how we engage with our friends and our loved ones, it's how we go back to work, it's how we go back to restaurants and get back to not just normal, but dare I say, we get back to better. So when we think about consumers and where they are, there's an old saying of when times are good, advertisers need to advertise and speak to audiences. And moreover, when times are bad, it's even more important for advertisers to connect with their audiences. And this is true when we think about the last 2 years that we've gone through. Consumers want to hear from brands. This is a time when brands have a role to play to building that confidence, to building that optimism that they have. And what's clear is that audiences want to hear from brands and how they're dealing with the pandemic, how they're dealing with audiences, how they're dealing with people. And when we think about the CNN audience in particular, they really want to hear from brands and approve of campaigns running this year and how they're dealing with the pandemic and everything. It's not just about advertising, but it's about valuable content and how do you connect with audiences in that manner. The second thing that we're sort of seeing over the last 20 months is consumers want brands that focus on people. This has been a rise in an accelerated shift that we're seeing in the past couple of years, and consumers choosing not only to buy from brands, but to work for brands that share their personal and social beliefs and values. Again, if we bring it back to the CNN audience, 68% of those really said that they want audiences to play a more responsible roles and support causes. This is a time when it's not just about your stakeholders and your shareholders, but it's about the communities, your employees, the people around you, and consumers are really valuing brands that really tap into that. The third thing that we're seeing about for sort of the last 20 months is consumers really want brands that make them feel valued. This is innate sort of human behavior that we have, that we want to feel connected. We want to relate to the things that we're spending our time with. And they value sort of brands and people who add value, who sort of respect their time and sort of add things back into that. So if we look at the CNN audience, this is a time when we realize that they want brands to help them improve their lives, improve their knowledge, their skills, add value, make them feel valued in this time. So when there's so much demand on people's time and attention and everything, how brands can find those moments to connect and add value and meet those needs and solve a problem is really, really important as we think about sort of the next sort of 20 months as we kind of come out of these last 20 months. So when we think and we shift into trust, trust is a huge thing over the last 20 months and how we sort of survive and thrive as brands. I think the big thing that we think about, and before we get into how you build trust and the value of creating that trust, let's think about how brands define trust and how consumers define trust. So when you think about it from a consumer standpoint and from your own personal standpoint, I think about what is it that makes you trust something, that makes you trust a person, that makes you trust a brand. The words that probably have come up to your mind are those who are intentional, those who are purposeful in your lives, those who are authentic, those who are genuine, those who are transparent. It's important in times when there's so much noise out there, when there's so many brands competing to grab attention, that as a brand, a publisher, an advertiser, you embody those qualities to not only connect with your audiences, but to really garner sort of a sense of relationship and build that relationship with them. For audiences and consumers, trust is not just a thing. It's a noun, but it's also a verb. It's how you act, it's how you behave. It's not just a tangible aspect, but it's something that they can feel and they want to see from brands. And so when you think about a time when as humans we are more doubtful and skeptical of things, building that trust is critical. It's a time where that is kind of the make and break that we have going forward. So when you think about it, there is a consumer crisis when it comes to trust. The last 20 months have really shown us, and there's a lot of sort of data points and even your personal data points that will bring this to life. But the thing is it might be broken, but it's not lost. There's still hope when it comes to consumers. 53% of consumers say that trust is a second to price as the most important factor when deciding to purchase a new brand. Think about your purchase behavior when you go online. If you're anything like me, you've spent a lot of time on Amazon trying to shop for and buy sort of the latest things that you need and everything. How do you know that when you purchase something, it's going to come, the right item's going to come, it's going to come in the time that you need, and it's going to be something that you can rely on and trust? 70% say that trusting a brand is more important today than it has been in the past. That's the role that brands have to play for us getting out of the pandemic, for us being there in the pandemic, for us, brands have been that layer of confidence and optimism for us to see a better future. And more importantly is 80% say that personal vulnerabilities, whether it's your health, whether it's your circumstances that you've gone through, is a reason why brand trust is more important. Think about the last 20 months and what we've gone into. How do we trust the brands and when we go to travel again? What airlines do we want to go to? What hotels do we want to stay at? What brands do we want to shop with? All of those have a huge part to play in terms of the decisions that we make. And when we look at our behaviors and our criteria in terms of what we make to sort of make a decision, what we've seen is a shift over the last year. This is a study that Accenture had done, looking at sort of their consumer pulse study, looking at sort of what the new sort of reimagined, reevaluated consumer was versus the traditional consumer pre-COVID. And what we're seeing is while price and the quality of a product are really important, what we're seeing in this new sort of reimagined, reevaluated, repurposed sort of consumer is that ease, trust, reputation, safety, the product, the service, the experience are all now playing a larger role in people's decision-making behavior. So when we think about it, trust isn't built overnight. Same thing with building emotion. Emotion is something that needs to be earned. It needs to be harnessed. And you don't earn that emotion until you can really understand where your brand sort of fits, what values, what needs, what concerns are you addressing with an audience, and how can your brands meet that? You can't know as a brand or a publisher or an advertiser if you're driving value to an audience until you know what need you're trying to solve for. So when we think about this in terms of our audiences, how do we earn that emotion? How do we build that trust? How do we build that connection that you have? Just as we sort of speak as an industry about the importance of brands and advertisers to treat their audiences as people and not to treat them as masses, that's very true as a return back. Consumers want to see the people behind a brand. At the end of the day, a company is a collection of its employees. So when we think about actually a brand's relationship with its consumers, it's not a very rational or irrational or unpersonal relationship. It's actually it's a human relationship. It's people to people. When you think about your audiences as people and when you act as a person, that's where you really start seeing the synergy between what brands and consumers can really go. And when you build that connection, that's where trust kind of comes into play, and we build that sort of value in everything. So when we think about that, how do we actually build those relationships and intentional relationships with audiences? The first and the foremost is to focus on people over profit. If the last 20 months has taught us anything, it's the focus that brands have had on building relationships, being present with audiences, has paid off more than those who have just been quick to sell and push selling. It's a kind of a key part around, if we think about things in the last 20 months, people haven't been quick to buy. So as brands, don't be quick to sell on that point. Build those relationships, understand what they're going through, empathize with audiences. With data and technology, we have more insights around our audiences, their motivations, their attitudes, their behaviors, their mindset. How can you find those moments in their day when you can add value with a meaningful experience? The second around building trust and connection is to act with intention and deliver on your brand promise. The easiest way to break trust with anyone is to not deliver on your words. As we said earlier, trust is something that's built over time. It's not built overnight. And so having that consistency of message, having that intention and building and delivering on that is how you sort of build trust in there. In no ways should your messaging be stronger than your actions or your product. You have to sort of match those two together. The third is being authentic to your brand storytelling. If we think about a moment in terms of how our brains work, our brains are engineered to receive information and to absorb information through stories, through visual stories. So as a brand, how do you connect with that? How do you build and tap into that right brain to really connect with audiences, to bring to life what your brand is, and to showcase who you really are? There was a recent work analysis that was done, and storytelling was the topmost strategy when it came to having an effective communication and delivering on what your brand is, who your brand is, and the vision of your brand. The fourth is providing consistent and valuable experiences. When we have a world where we want to meet consumers where they are, when and when they're most receptive to things, it's important to deliver experiences that are consistent to your brand. Trust is not built overnight. Just like any skill that is worth learning, you don't learn overnight. It's built over time. So having that consistency of message, that consistency of presence, consistency of that experience that adds value to someone's life is really important to building that connection and taking those audiences on a journey. And the fifth is to stand out with quality, not quantity. This is a time when there's so much demand for our attention, so much demand on our time, so much demand and strain for where we put our resources and our mental availability. As a brand, you don't want to be shouting the most and shouting louder. It's about finding those moments and those pockets where your audiences are really going to engage, when they're in the mindset to receive your story, to receive your content, to receive your message, and build that connection there. This isn't you want to sort of bombard your audiences with information. It's finding that quality moments, that quality content, and speaking with purpose. So when we think about trust and where brand sort of sits, brands sit at an intersection where your personal and your societally issues are addressed, where your actions are backed up and your words are backed up by your actions. So when we think about trust and where things are, what a brand says, your message has to be met and balanced with what you as a brand or a publisher do, which is your actions. You have to balance out meeting as an audience and delivering to your consumers what matters to them, and meeting that personal sort of connection and their personal beliefs and values, and also balancing out what's important to those around them. So the society part, and looking at not just your shareholders, but looking at the communities, your employees. Are you taking care of those things around you? The IPA just released today, as part of an analysis that they had just done, that brands who have a brand purpose and speak with a brand purpose have a 15% more growth in market share than those who didn't have sort of that sort of campaign. So this is really where the intersection hits in terms of having that consistency, having that empathy, and driving value and balancing out what audiences want, what their concerns and everything are, but also acting with intention. So why does this matter? Why do we care? Trust is one of those things pre-pandemic and pre-everything that was probably a very intangible asset that no one quite knew how to quantify. What I would argue is that the last 20 months has actually made trust and the importance of building relationships with audience the most tangible asset that you can have as an organization. So when we think about why does it matter to build trust, well, the first thing is you become more relatable to your audiences. As we look at as human beings, we want to relate to things. Think about the brands that you buy, think about the shows that you watch and everything. You connect with those things that you can relate to. I would say gone are the times of using the words of it's relevant to me or it resonates with me. It has to relate to you. Audiences don't care about the sales pitch anymore. They don't care about the marketing gimmicks. They want to know who your brand is. They want to see the employees. They want to know that the brand that they're purchasing, that they're spending their time with, is built by people just like them. And they want to look at, brands that share that common value, that they're part of that mix and everything. And with nearly 80% of those globally will go out of their way to engage with a brand that shares that value, that connects with them and adds sort of meaning and value to their lives. The second thing is by building trust and connections with your audiences, you create loyalty and higher engagements. In a time when, if you can connect with those audiences, use that learning to really understand what their needs and their concerns are, you build that trust. What consumers will do in return is reward you with their loyalty, their engagement, and their advocacy. So if we look at a recent Edelman Trust report, consumers are willing to give back to those brands that they trust. So in loyalty, it's 75% of those are more willing to repurchase a brand despite the price changes or sensitivities on that. They'll re-engage, they'll come back to a brand that they trust and they want to engage with. There'll be higher engagements. They'll look at how do we share that information? How do we spend longer with that brand? But more importantly, how do we reward that brand with personal information? So as we think about a world where third-party cookies are going away, when we're going more to direct consumer and we're trying to build out those relationships, I'm more willing to give my information to a brand that I trust, the brand that I, is transparent to me, a brand, that shares my values. I'm more willing to give my personal information and even my dollars to brands that you trust. And the third part is advocacy. You're more willing and more likely to talk about brands that you trust, and you're more likely to recommend those brands that you trust. And when we think about how we make decisions, if we go back to that, yes, there's advertising, there's a role of content and everything, but you also rely on those people around you, their opinions, word of mouth, advocacy. You look at comments, you look at opinion boards for what to purchase. This is a really important part. By building that trust, you build, and your audiences will reward you with loyalty, that engagement, and that advocacy, which is invaluable when you think about it. And the last is delivering on growth. That is the tangible part. By having that trust, you not only gives you consumers the confidence to make that decision. If you think about, in the B2B space, when there's millions and billions of dollars on the line, how do you build trust and confidence with your consumers that they can have confidence in their decisions that they're making? When you're on a B2C side, how do you build that confidence to know that the product's going to arrive, the right product's going to arrive, and it's going to arrive in the time to address your things? So building that trust, building that confidence with consumers is really, really important. Furthermore, what I would say is it allows you as a brand, by creating that dialogue with audiences, by creating that connection with audiences, you have a feedback. You get to learn more about your audiences. You get to learn more about their mindsets, what's important to them, how you connect with them in a different manner, which allows you to also innovate. It allows you to take risk. It allows you to do something different with them. And your audiences who trust you and are loyal to you will take you through and will carry you through that. They'll see you through hiccups. They'll see you through sort of bumps in the road and everything else. So, in a time when we kind of go through the last 20 months and everything that we've had, we are in a time of change. We are in a time of disruption. And two of the greatest assets that anyone can sort of build on this is building a trust and an emotional connection with audiences, build intentional relationships, connect with audiences, understand what their motivations are, their interests, their needs, and look to solve them. If you do that, if you build that bridge, if you build that connection, they will reward you with their loyalty, with their time, with their dollars, but more importantly, they'll allow you to grow and take new adventures in the future. Thank you very much. My name is Tini Sevak. It's been an absolute pleasure. Stay tuned for more from Media on Seine. Thank you. Thank you.